Welcome to In the News for October the 28th, 2022. My name is Brett Burney from appsandlaw.com.
And my name is Jeff Richardson from iPhoneJD.com. I like that my name is. That's good. Good morning, Brett.
Good morning, Jeff. Everything is updated.
It's all
Everything
updated.
is updated.
It's just
oh
all
my
new.
goodness. You had a good post this past week as well, where, I mean, pretty much just what you just said, right? I think it was everything is updated. The iPad OS 16.1, iOS 16.1, Watch OS, Mac OS, and maybe possibly more. This is a crazy week on there.
HomePod was updated. The whole thing was updated. And, you know, it's fun because we talk about, and we're going to talk today about new Mac hardware, and new Mac hardware is great. Don't get me wrong. But when there's new operating systems out, it's nice because they always have the big marquee features, but then there's like the tiny little features that don't even get press attention. And you discover it like a few days later and you're like, I love that feature. And I didn't even have to pay anything new. And suddenly I have something cool. So it's great.
Yeah. We've been anticipating this for a while. Mostly, I would say, for me personally, it's the iPad OS. Like, we've been living on iOS on the iPhone 16 for a while now, but we haven't got the update on iPad OS. And I've only had maybe about 3 or 4 days to play with that. How about we'll talk about the iPad next? Let's just generally talk about iOS 16.1. Some of the things we've been kind of expecting this for a while with live activities, right, is something that's new. How about let's talk about that quickly?
Yeah, and I love the dynamic island on the new iPhone 14, but even if you don't have the new iPhone 14, you can still take advantage of live updates on your home screen, but it's even more useful if it can be at the very top of your phone. And so we're now starting to see that more apps can put more things up there and put alerts. I love that John Voorhees did this first set of apps that have been updated for it. And I took a quick list through this, and with the exception of Carrot Weather, which was interesting, and I guess we haven't had any rain this week in New Orleans, but what's going to happen is if there's rain coming and using the Carrot Weather app and you see that and you jump back into the home screen, it's going to update at the top so you can see a little indicator of, you know, when the rain is starting and when it's starting. This is a feature that, I mean, I originally associated with that Dark Sky app years and years and years ago, that, you know, what precise minute will it start and what precise minute will it stop. So that's useful. But the rest of them that were on this particular list did not jump out at me, but he called this post part 1, you know, indicating that we're going to be having part 2 and part 3. So again, we're on the brink of apps taking advantage of this, and this will be great.
There was one here he mentioned that, because I haven't really tried any of these, although I am most excited about, like, for Uber rides, right? Or Lyft rides. Yeah. That, to me, because I would always have to stand on the curb and, like, unlock my phone and go into the Uber app and check. So he didn't include that yet on this list. Maybe that'll be part 2. But one that I do want to try, maybe even tonight, is the TV remote app on the iPhone. And it you know, because usually if I use the remote, I have a physical remote. I like that just fine. But sometimes I like to use the remote app on the iPhone, especially if I need to type in a search term or something, right? Even though the dictation thing works great. But every once in a while, I'll use the remote app on the phone. And I want to try this out, that now it can be in the live activity, like it can show up on the home screen there, the little
is this
TV
Apple's
remote.
remote app, or is this a third-party app called
Oh,
TV?
I don't know.
I don't know. I
wonder if he
links
click
to
on
the
it
link
here
and see what it is. I
let
just
me
assumed
open
it was
this.
a third-party app. Yeah, so this is a third-party app called TV Remote, but it's the same idea.
Interesting. I just assumed that it was, because I think isn't it called? The Apple.
It's called Remote.
It's just called Remote.
But this is a free app, so you can check it out, Brett, and see if you like it.
Maybe I will tonight.
So yeah.
Another feature that you linked to today was something, I don't know if I'm interested in this yet or not, because I'll tell you in a moment that I'm not excited very much on the battery side of my iPhone 14 Pro, but Apple has details about clean energy charging, which just came out in iOS 16.1.
Well, whether you're interested or not, you're probably using it because it's turned on by default. And what this means is most people go to bed around the same time and wake up around the same time and charge their iPhone overnight. And so the iPhone can usually figure out, okay, well, I'm pretty safe that during this, 5-hour period, this is like the charging time, but it doesn't need the full 5 hours to charge your iPhone, right? It needs, less than an hour. And so what this new feature is Apple is actually connecting with your local grid. It will say, Jeff Richardson lives in New Orleans.
Interesting.
And we know that in New Orleans that using power between the hours of like 2 and 3 a.m., it's more likely to use green energy sources. Whereas if I use power between midnight and 1 a.m., it's going to be more likely to be using, I don't know, coal-fired plants or something like that.
Okay.
Now, how they figured all that out is way beyond, my pay grade. But they figure out, like, here's the best time period to be getting the greenest use of the power grid. And so let's recharge your iPhone during that time period. It doesn't cost you anything extra. Now, this is, although this feature is on by default, it's if it notices any irregularity in your schedule, if you're traveling, if you're not at home, if there's anything that's off kilter, it's not going to do this. But if it just says, look, this is the routine, I know this part of, this person's routine. This is just a normal night at home that they're going to bed at the normal time and they're plugging in the iPhone. It will do this. Now, you can turn it off if you don't like this idea.
Right.
But why? Who knows how much different it's going to make? But over the millions and millions of iPhones that are out there, maybe it'll have a small incremental impact. And why not?
Something else that I have not tried yet, mainly because the one thing I have not updated is my MacBook Pro. I've been out this week, so I haven't upgraded to Ventura, which is the new Mac OS version of the operating system. But one of the things that I know we were excited about that Apple talked about over the summer was the continuity camera, to where you could use your iPhone in conjunction with your Mac as a webcam. But not only that, there were some different views that were going to be available, and I don't know that everybody has started testing this out yet. I haven't seen a whole lot of people talking about it. They were talking about it over the summer, but I'm excited to try this when I can.
Yeah, the second part, just to go on that one first, that's the desk view feature, that if your phone is using the very wide camera, there's a separate app on the Mac, which I think is called Desk View. And so you can open that up, and it basically takes the very, very bottom of the picture and it sort of, skews it a little bit so that it's almost as if, even though your camera's looking straight at you, it's almost as if you had an overhead camera looking straight down. There are some people that will use this feature. It's probably not one that I'm going to, and a lot of people will use, but it's there and it's nice. And because it's a separate app, you can actually tell an app like Zoom or Microsoft Teams to sort of use that app as the input. And so you could switch between, or you could even have two at the same time. So it's nice that Apple was smart enough to put it in a separate app. But to the core continuity camera feature, I think it makes great sense, because no matter how good, some Macs have better webcams than others, some are worse, but all webcams that are built into your computer, whether it's a laptop or an iMac or whatever, they're going to all be pretty crappy compared to the iPhone. And maybe it doesn't even have to be the most recent iPhone. Even if you have like an iPhone for 3 or 4 years ago, it's still going to have a better camera. So why not use that camera for your video chat? And there's already one little thing made by Belkin. They worked with Apple that's made to sort of sit on a laptop. And the rumor is that Belkin's going to come out with one that will also work with like an iMac or with a desktop monitor. And I'm sure third parties will. I mean, these will just be like $10-15 devices that you'll find on Amazon that people can make. But once people have a lot more holders out, you'll be able to put your iPhone in a place that makes more sense. In fact, for me, I have a this Glyph, which has been out for forever, which is a device that hooks around your iPhone so that you could then either put it on a holder or it's got a little screw and you can connect it to a tripod or something. So I could actually use that right now. Like you, I haven't updated my Mac yet just because I want to take the time to do it, and I'll probably do it this weekend. And I don't do a ton of video conferencing. I have a Mac at home and I have a PC at the office. Most of my video conferencing I do at my office, like I'm doing right now. But so I wish this worked with the PC. But when I am at home on my Mac, I am going to give it a shot, because again, my iMac webcam, it's everything, it's just it looks a little fuzzy. It's not great. Whereas why not look a little bit better? Plus I can actually have more control too. I can maybe put it point it to wherever I want it, if I want it higher or lower or whatever. So I'm looking forward to trying out this feature. I think it makes great sense.
Well, I wish it was available for Windows, but I think this is part of this very interesting journey, I think, that Apple is kind of going on, what they generally call continuity, right? Which allows you to share even like web pages or
clipboard,
from your iOS devices, iPad and iPhone, to your Mac, which I honestly love. And this is just like sort of the next little kind of an evolution on this. But overall, I just know, I think this is going to be great. And it seems to me, I think I remember back in the summer that Apple was sort of doing this as a response to the fact that we're all using Zoom so much more and FaceTime. And it's like, we always have these great cameras in our phone. We might as well be be able to use them easily, even with our Mac. But right now, of course, it is only available on the Mac. Hey, Jeff, I'm going to go back quickly to this battery thing because the clean energy, nothing against that. I think it's fine. But I just want to ask you real quick. My hope was that iOS 16.1 was going to improve what I am detecting is not the best battery life on my iPhone 14 Pro. I don't know. I'm just curious if you've experienced this. I feel like if I can get through a full day, I'm doing good on my iPhone 14 Pro. And I guess maybe it's just because I'm a little nervous that's always on screen. I leave that on, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, is that draining my battery a little bit more? I don't feel like I'm using my phone more than I used my 12 Pro is what I upgraded from. But have you seen anything along those lines that you're concerned about? I seem like I've seen a few people tweet about it or talk about the fact, but I don't know. I was just kind of holding out, hoping that 16.1 was maybe going to improve that a little bit. Doesn't sound like you've experienced that.
I've had my iPhone 14 Pro, not the Max, just the regular, the Pro, since the first day it came out. I have noticed no difference in battery power. In fact, it's funny that you mentioned it because literally earlier this week, I was sitting there at my computer and I thought about, like, I've got one of these little, Apple doesn't even sell them anymore, but these little stands that you can sit your iPhone in and prop it up. And I was thinking, I'm going to put my iPhone on there. And I was like, oh, well, that's silly because I always have way too much power at the end of the day on my iPhone. I don't need to charge it. And then I told myself, well, you know what? I'm going to put it in there anyway, because that way I can just look at the picture that's on the screen. So, so no, I specifically have not, nor have I seen any mention of it on the internet. But now that you've mentioned it, I'm going to be on the lookout for comments. So I wonder if there's something specific to your setup. I
know. And it could just be I do like having the always on screen. Yeah, and I just remember people were kind of nervous about that initially. Like, is that going to drain too much of the battery as it goes through the day? I feel like with my 12 Pro, even it's 2 years old, I was get to the end of the day and I may have, 25, 30% left. And it's like, that would have been enough. I usually would charge it every night. Mm-hmm. And anyway, okay. I just wanted to ask and see if that was something that you had seen, but since maybe we'll report on that.
Yeah. And when people ask me about this, one of the things that I often tell them is if they go, and I'm sure you know this, Brett, but if you go into the settings app on your iPhone and then you go into battery, you can see which apps are using your battery the most.
Right.
And so when I do it, for example, now when I do it, so it's telling me that the app that's using my battery in the most is the Overcast app, which is what I use for podcasts.
Right.
And it says, for example, it's been using 21% of my battery, but I don't think that's because Overcast is a battery hog, because it's at the top. It's using the battery the most because I listen to podcasts a whole lot. And so, in the morning and at night, stuff like that. Right. So it's using the battery, not because it's being a pig, but just because it's the app I'm using the most. So just because you see an app at the top. But having said that, I have sometimes seen people say, you know what, I see Facebook at the top of the list. And it makes no sense because I haven't opened up Facebook in like 5 days. And that's when I say, okay, something is going on. It's interesting, as I look through this list, I see exposure notifications, which is the thing that Apple does for COVID and stuff like that.
Right.
I never actively do anything with that, but I know it's always looking at it in the background, and I see that it's been using about 5% of my battery. But so if this is advice that I often give to people, and so I ask you, as you're looking through it right now, live on the, as we record this, anything unusual jumping out at you in there, or is it just the normal apps you would expect?
It's interesting. I hadn't gone in here and started looking at it, but I will pay attention to it now. When you go into that battery, you can do last 24 hours and you can do last 10 days on there. Right. And interesting, when I go into the last 24 hours, the most thing that's using my battery usage is Safari, my browser, because I'm constantly using that. That's at 18%. But if I go into my last 10 days, the thing that is using 15% is home and lock screen.
That doesn't mine's okay. So mine's at 10%, just for that data point. Mine's at 10% home and lock screen. Okay. So and I guess that just means that the lock screen is on a lot because it's on when you're not using it. Well, continue to investigate that. And if I see anything, maybe we can talk about this again in a week or two if we sort of figure this out, because with the brand new iPhone, you shouldn't be seeing that, obviously.
I know, exactly. And again, it's not like, I'm limping along at the very end of the day. I don't want to give that impression. It's just, it seems to me, and again, maybe I just kind of have, a sense because I knew people were talking about, well, is that always on screen going to, drain the battery? And we talked about this a little bit. I don't think Apple would have released it in that way, but good. We'll keep an eye on it. That's good. Let's talk about the iPads. You had a post a little while ago about the new iPads, and it seems like your concern or your questions, your questioning capability has been echoed across the interwebs from several folks. I think one here from Jason Snell, one title headline was mixed feelings, and another one you linked to was mixed signals. It just seems like a lot of people are scratching their heads about these new iPad models.
Yeah, the one thing I do want to emphasize though is the mixed nature of it. And I put this at the start of my post today on Friday, is that it's really, if you look at the big picture, if you are simply looking to upgrade your iPad, do it. These are great models out there. If you want the low end iPad, the new iPad is so good that you may not need to spend more on an iPad Air. Now, if you want to use the pencil, I do recommend the iPad Air. But if you have zero use for a pencil in your life, this new low end iPad, you can save yourself some money, and maybe even spend some of that money on the fancy new keyboard they have. So that's good news. And if you wanted to get an iPad Pro, the new iPad Pro is a little bit faster. Nothing wrong with that. It's got a new feature, that you can use the pencil of the hover feature. Nothing wrong with that. One of the big knocks on the iPad Pro is that it uses the same design that the iPad Pro has had since around 2018.
Same camera.
On the one hand, same camera, for example.
Location.
On the one hand, I guess that's not very exciting, but on the other hand, this is an amazing design. I love the iPad Pro's design. Now, does it mean that there will never, ever be anything better? No, of course not. But it's a good design. So from, the actual individual units are great. It's only when you sort of step back and you look at these devices compared to the things that are already in the lineup that haven't been updated, and you look at the new features, like, for example, the fact that the camera is at the top where, the good Lord always intended it to be, of the brand new iPad, but it's not there on the iPad Pro. That's where you're like, well, that's curious, and so there's little things like that you're like, this is strange. The fact that the new iPad has to have this silly dongle just to use the first generation pencil, that's a little strange. So there are weird things like that, but And they're worth saying, and the reason I think it is because I don't think that this is the lineup that Apple intended to have this today. I think that if Apple had their druthers, I think that we would have had a new iPad Pro design today, a lot of things, but things get slower in the world, component shortages, blah, 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 blah. So this is the world as we have it. And so there are some questions. And when you look at the overall lineup, there will be places where you'll say, I'm not sure that this is all consistent and necessarily doesn't make a lot of sense. But it doesn't take away from the fact that there are individual really good models.
I think that statement alone you just made would make me feel better about it. If Apple, this was not the models that Apple intended, but for a variety of reasons that we'll never know about, right? These are internally within Apple, and decisions that they had to make, like, hey, we can't do this, which was on our roadmap, because we have chip shortages, or, something else wasn't able to come through, or we weren't ready. Maybe they were spooked about, iPad OS 16, who knows? But if that's true, that makes me feel a little bit better. And, again, I think overall, I loved your comments at the very beginning of your post today, just because, there are great models out there if you want to upgrade, and depending on what you want, which is always what it is. If you just want a base level model iPad that can do everything that you need it to do, you're not so concerned about the pencil. That it's a great base model. The iPad Pro is fantastic as well. I think for some of us that are sort of on the nerdier side, that are iPad geeks about it. I mean, we had preferences. We would have wished that the iPad Pro would have had a camera on the side, things like that. I mean, but I think for the vast majority of people, it's going to be good. But anyway, I know we talked about this last time.
Yeah. What it does mean, though, Brett, is this: that if you already have an iPad or an iPad Pro or an iPad Air that you like, you probably have less incentive to upgrade this year,
right?
Which means that Apple may have lower sales than they might otherwise have. So, but that's on Apple. The plus side is if you have an iPad that you want and you weren't quite sure you wanted to spend the money to upgrade this year, you're not gonna feel like you're compelled to do so. So hold on to that money, and it maybe be a year or two. And we maybe see big things coming with the iPad Pro. I was listening to another podcast this morning, and they were discussing rumors, Brett, and these are just rumors, but that when the next iPad Pro is updated in a year or two, and it might be 2 years, 2024, that we will have huge iPad Pros, like a 14 and a 16-inch. So the screen of the iPad will be like a laptop screen, just without the keyboard. A 16-inch iPad. Wow, there's an interesting thought there. I'm sure artists would love it. There's a small part of me that would love to have a big screen like that, but then again, carrying it around would be a lot. So I don't know. Who knows? That's the rumor. Rumors for the future. But we shall see what's in the future for the iPad Pro.
Well, thank you for this link. Here is our deals section of the podcast today. Although, it may be out already now. You had a link to that.
It was working last night.
If you do get a new iPad, or you want to get the Apple Pencil 2nd generation, which I just think is brilliant. I just checked this maybe an hour and a half ago. Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness. I feel so bad. Well, okay. The regular price for the Apple Pencil 2nd generation, isn't it like $120, $130, something like that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
129. I think it's $129.
Right.
And Amazon had it on sale. You said $89. When I checked it this morning, it was $85.
Oh, goodness,
Jeff.
Wow.
I know. Well, now I guess that's how we know why it's gone.
I saw this earlier this week, and I tweeted it actually. So if you follow me on Twitter at Jeff Richardson, then you learned about this a few days ago.
Ooh, nice plug. Yeah.
But having said that, it was that was a
there.
great deal to get the Apple Pencil for $89. My goodness, that was a great deal. So
that's insane. Okay, keep watching it. Yeah, keep watching it. All right, we talked about something that we have been wanting for a long time. I think pretty much everything along my Apple product line is USB-C, except for my iPhone,
right?
My AirPods, and then I have the Duo MagSafe charger that I put beside my bed, and that is Lightning. What else would be Lightning right now? Do we have anything else? Or the Apple TV's Lightning? I never plug it in. I don't even know.
Yeah, actually,
maybe the TV remote.
The remote had been Lightning, but they just changed it with the new Apple TV that came out a week or two ago, and now it uses USB-C too. Yeah, so there's very little left that still uses Lightning. Very little.
Why we're talking about this is, if the iPhone has Lightning, it's not going to be able to be sold in Europe within the next few years, right? We talked about this, that what is it, European something or another, the EU regulations are saying that everything now must be USB-C. And I remember we talked about this, like, is it good for a governmental body to regulate something like this because the technology could go out of whack? Anyway, we heard from Apple themselves, which is a little odd because we don't typically hear them reacting to this, but I love this little quote from this was who we call Jaws. It's Greg Joswiak, right? His quote was, "Obviously, we'll have to comply. We have no choice."
Yeah.
But even that, we typically don't hear that from Apple.
Yeah, you normally don't hear Apple talking about what's going to come on the iPhone that hasn't even been announced yet. But again, we also have the writing on the wall here. So is it going to be next? Apple traditionally releases new iPhones in September, October, right? So this time next year, will we have a USB-C iPhone? Or, because I think they actually technically have to the end of the year of next year, they could wait 2 years, but it's either that. So either next year's iPhone or 2 years from now will be USB-C. And again, as you said, Brett, so many of your devices use USB-C, and many other people are in the same boat that I actually don't mind them using the USB-C. So, that's great. I mean, again, I'm not a big fan of the government telling you what kind of connector you need to use, but in this particular case, the result of it, I think I'm fine with, and it will be nice to have USB-C on the iPhone, because then that's one less charger that you'll be able to, carry around in the future.
Well, that's it. For me, at least, and I'll talk about this in a future week, I got one of those Anker GAN chargers, which is great, right? So it's USB-C, but I got to tell you, I have to, in my bag, my little bag, everybody has like a spaghetti bag, right? To where my wires are in there. I have 2 or 3 USB-C to USB-C cables. They work great for my MacBook Pro now. It works great for my iPad Pro, but I still have to carry USB-C to lightning cables because I need to charge my iPhone. Like that's the only thing. I don't mind. I honestly, I don't mind as much that it uses the different ports, but I just have to carry the extra, and it just gets me frustrated every time.
It's not just that you have to carry the extra cable, Brett, but if you look at them, can you just look at the cable and tell which is which?
No. I have to get them all out.
Right. And then even if you look at the end of it, you're almost like, wait a minute, is that lightning? Is that USB-C? So it's
if it's dark or something. Yeah,
exactly. You can't even tell. So that's the real thing. It's not just the extra cable because that's not much space, but it's the uncertainty. So, which it reminds me of going back. One of the great things about USB-C is that, and lightning, is that it doesn't matter which way you plug it in. You could just plug it in without looking at it.
Yes.
But now we have to look at it to see if it's lightning or if it's USB-C. So yeah,
maybe that's why. Yeah, maybe that's why I like the wireless MagSafe charging. And Jeff, why are MagSafe charging circles white? I feel like that's like a kid asking their dad, like, Dad, why is the sky blue? Because that's the way God made it.
Because that's the way they always have been.
The MagSafe's charging circle is white because that's the way Apple made it.
Mm-hmm. But we learned.
But maybe that'll change now.
Yeah, we got Andrew. I think it was Andrew O'Hara who figured this one out.
Yes, it was.
That looking at the new Apple guidelines for third-party developers, they will be able in the future to make a accessory that they can advertise as being MagSafe compatible without making it white. And so at some point we will have, things that can be, we won't have to stand out so much for it. We can have a black one, we could have a colored one, whatever.
Right.
So we're going to see interesting, more comes out in the future. Now I have to admit, I don't really mind the white, and I actually understand where Apple was coming from, because when you see that white circle, and it hadn't even occurred to me that it was all that iconic, but that's MagSafe. That's going to work with MagSafe. And so, but so be it. In the future, we'll see things that your brain won't instantly say is MagSafe compatible, but once you connect your iPhone on it and you see that it's charging, then you'll know.
I feel like it's almost like a badge, maybe not so much of honor, but of like pristineness. Like, oh well, he has I just got this from my iPhone 14 Pro. This is the Apple it's not the silicone case, but it's like the hard shell case that has the circle on there. Yeah. And it has the magnet. And I got to say, I like having that magnet on there because it does kind of, jump into the position that I like all the time. But when I see people in the airports are so using it, I'm like, I see what you're doing there. I see what you got.
Yeah.
Something that Apple did this week that I am not so happy about, although I don't think I'm going to complain because I'm going to keep paying it. I'm almost like, Apple, here's my wallet. So we've talked about Apple subscriptions, right? Apple Music, Apple TV Plus, Apple Fitness Plus. And you and I both like the Apple One subscription because it includes everything. Plus you get the iCloud, 2 terabytes of iCloud storage. And I felt like those prices on each of those subscriptions, whether for Apple One bundle or for the individual services, were pretty reasonable. But now I'm having it. Now it's hurting a little bit more. Apple bumped up the prices on all of these services this past week.
Apparently, the reason for the price bump was music, and just about all of these packages have music in them. Either it's just Apple Music or it's part of the bundle, the Apple One, like you're talking about. And the reason for that is that the music labels negotiated that they want to have higher. They want to get more royalties. They want higher prices. Now, theoretically, that should result in more money going to artists, which I guess is a good thing. You certainly want artists to be paid for their music.
Agreed.
But that's, I'm sure the record industry gets a cut of it too and everything else. But I think that was the trigger of it. But as a result, all the prices came up. And the reason I mention that is because if that is the cause, as I have read, it's not just going to be Apple Music. I mean, Spotify, the other third parties that are smaller providing music, they're going to all have to do so as well. So, all of us have gotten used to paying for streaming music and really enjoying streaming music. I love streaming music. But it means that when the price goes up, we have to pay a little bit more. So
I almost feel like, and this is just me on the conspiracy side, like don't give me some kind of a line. Maybe it's not a line with the Apple Music. I think you're totally in line with what you're saying there. But it's just like, just be honest and say, hey, everything's going up, inflation, whatever. It's like, don't blame something else. I feel like I knew this was happening. I just was hoping that it would, go on. And of course, there's always that thought. It's like, come on, Apple. Can't you just like pad some of that with, the $18 billion or, $1,800 billion that you have? But I know that's a little unfair. Just quickly, I think it's a general average of like $1 to $2 extra, right? So for the Apple One Premier, which is the highest end, and I love it because all of the things bundled in, it was $29.95 for a month for the Apple One bundle. And again, I put my whole family on it because I love it. I mean, I think it's really not bad of an investment. By the way, there's tax on top of that, right? Which there should be, but usually I think mine came to about $31. Well, now that's bumped up to $32.95 per month for that Apple One Premier. Plus there's going to be some tax on there. But the other lower end, the Apple Music individual and family accounts are all going to be bumped up, I think, by about $2 on there. So yeah. Just FYI, I guess, like everything else is bumping up a little bit. Lettuce and Apple One subscriptions, it's all going to be bumped up there. How about some smart essential oils? That would be nice. I'd like to have that running right now. This was a great story you linked to. It is literally a HomeKit smart Wi-Fi essential oil diffuser. Lovely.
There you go. So you can turn your diffuser on and off remotely, which I think I've seen a version of this before, but now Meros is just one of these new companies that I say new. I don't know how long they've been around, but I had not really paid much attention to Meros until the last year or so. And they now have a whole bunch of HomeKit compatible devices. In fact, I know parenthetically, about almost a month ago, I replaced in my backyard the thing that I had used to turn my lights on in my backyard on off.
Okay.
The one that I used to use broke, and I bought one of these Meros ones, and I was going to post a review on iPhone JD about it, but I figured I would use it for about 6 weeks. I wanted to use it for a couple months before I posted about it. But so far it's been working great. Teaser result. Teaser warning, it's working great. But one of the things that Meros also makes is a diffuser. And again, usually when we actually have a diffuser at my house. I don't know if you have one. Sometimes we put it on, especially in the fall, just sort of get some interesting colors, scents into the home. And it seems like it's a sort of thing that you just turn on and then you leave it on and then it does its thing. But if you really want to have that precise turn it on or off, turn it up or down, I suppose, why not? This one might cross over into, don't know if it quite needs HomeKit support, but then again, I've never owned one. And maybe somebody out there was like, Jeff, once you use a HomeKit enabled essential oil diffuser, you'll never go back. And
I liked how Bradley Chambers writing this. He said, some people think of oil diffusers as miracle devices, while others see them as a form of an air freshener. I fall into the latter category. But it's kind of nice. He talks about putting it into Christmas peppermint. But my goodness, I was expecting this to be upwards of like $60, $70. But on Amazon right now, it's $34. And you can apply a $4 coupon. So wow, jump right on that if you are into essential oils. Lovely. All right, in the know. Let's get to, I feel like I couldn't decide on a specific tip, Jeff. So this might be just a quick lightning round on the Stage Manager for iPad. So I have not used any of the public beta. So this week was the first time that I was exposed to Stage Manager on the iPad.
Me too.
This is a brand new way to do some you could have multiple windows on your screen as opposed to just the split view and the slide over, which I still think I was kind of getting used to, as it were. This is brand new with iPad OS 16 that just came out. I'll say quickly right off the bat, I think I'm liking it. I like it. I'm always one to use multiple windows on any computer that I've worked with, Windows or Mac or anything else. So when the iPad first came out, I know a lot of us just talked about the fact that it's such a great in between type of a device, because when you open an app on the iPad, you just look at that app. Right? You're not multitasking. You're not having to do multiple things. You can just focus on the work that's in front of you. But I think I'm liking it, but that could change in a week on there. So one of the things that I always use, because I have the Magic Keyboard for my iPad, is I like using Command Tab. I always used to use, Control Tab on Windows to switch between different windows on my Windows computers. I use Command Tab on my Mac to do that constantly throughout the day. And I like doing that on the iPad as well. Now, I'm finding though, if I have a stage, I guess I call it a stage, right? Right now I've got a stage and I've got Safari open, I got OneNote open, and I have my iMessages app open. Okay. So that's one stage. So all three of those windows are there. And I love that I can move around each of those windows and I can sort of resize each of those windows, and I can move it around so that I can see all of the windows if I need to. I really like the drag in the corner. I've been used to doing that for a long time. Now, if I do the Command Tab, and I highlight an app that is open in one of those. For example, I'm looking at Safari now, I do Command Tab, and I can open up OneNote. Because that OneNote app is in the same stage, then it will bring that OneNote app to the forefront, right? So that I can see that. So I can flip back and forth between those apps in the same stage. However, if I highlight an app when I'm doing Command Tab, and I highlight an app that is in a different stage, then it flips to that different stage. Now, there's all kinds of different ways how I can, how we can all access and pull up different apps that I want, that are involved in these different stages on there. But I guess I would have there was a different keyboard shortcut that I could just say, I don't want to flip between stages. I just want to flip between the different apps that are in this stage. Don't have that yet, unless somebody can tell us if it's available out there. But it's okay. I do love the fact that I can swipe in from the left and I can see my different stages. And I anticipate as I start using this more, I'm going to have different stages available over on the left when I swipe in, that then I can say, okay, I'm ready to do some research, right? With Safari, my OneNote, and maybe PDF Expert. But now I'm ready to check on email, and I want to have email open and my Notes app open. I anticipate that I might be getting there, but I'm not quite there yet. And the last thing quickly, because I want to hear a couple of your experiences, is I like to have my Safari window spread out pretty big, not full screen yet. But if I spread it out too much, then I can't see some of the apps that I know are open in that same stage behind it, right? And so then I have to resize this screen. I almost wish there was a way that I could swipe my fingers up and down on the trackpad and I can see just the apps that are open on that particular stage, if that makes sense. I do that now on the Mac because I have, I forget exactly what they call it, but I can swipe 3 fingers up on my trackpad on the Mac and I can see all the windows that I have open. Or if I've got 2 windows open in Safari, different multiple, or maybe I'll use Microsoft Word. I can swipe 3 fingers down on my trackpad on the Mac and I can see all of the Microsoft Word windows that I have open. I hope that makes sense. I know I'm getting into the weeds here. But I can't do something like that on the iPad yet. Maybe that'll change. To me, that's all software fixes that can happen on there. But I'm liking it. The last thing quickly is there are some new gestures. We've always done 4-finger swipes to the left or to the right on the iPad. And that typically has allowed us to swap between full screen apps on the iPad.
Right.
That still works, but I find it doesn't swap between the apps that I have open in a stage. It swaps between the stages. I'm not so happy about that. And then lastly, a new gesture, I believe, that came out is you can swipe 1 finger left to right on the very bottom of your screen, almost like right below the dock. And that seems to do almost essentially the same thing as a 4-finger swipe to the left or right. Okay, I'll stop now. Well, your thoughts, sir?
It's interesting. I don't necessarily agree with all of your suggestions, but it doesn't really matter. The point is that what you said is consistently what I have been experiencing myself and what I've been hearing other people say, which is that Stage Manager, in theory, is a nice idea, but I wish it behaved in a slightly different way. I've heard people complain, for example, that if you're in one set of windows and you open a link that would open up a different app, they want that app to be open within the same stage, not within a new stage. And again, some people may disagree with that, but when you get to the point of manipulating your window, using Stage Manager on an iPad is an advanced feature, but the people that want to do it are going to have very specific desires. And I think that although Apple tends to, on the computer, Apple lets you set just about anything that you want. But on the iPad, they try to keep things a little bit more simple. I think Apple needs to realize that the folks that are using Stage Manager are going to be advanced users. And so give them the more advanced options, give them a whole lot of controls, a whole lot of settings that I can, do it this way. I can do it that way. Maybe allow them to make windows any size they want instead of just the specific, predefined sizes that are available. I hope that Apple does that because I do think that what's in Stage Manager does make a lot of sense. And I've been trying it some this week. For me, normally I prefer my apps to be full screen. Every once in a while, I will like multitasking and have 2 screens next to each other. And although I don't, 90% of the time I'm not using that mode, but when I do use that mode, I love that we have multitasking. Now, some of the time that I do multitasking, which is only a small percentage of my overall use, I might want to be in the Stage Manager view because it is really nice to have overlapping windows. I find it more easy for me, because I normally don't have a keyboard attached to my iPad, just to sort of tap and move back and forth. So I do think that Stage Manager is a good idea. But it doesn't always work exactly the way that I want. As I learn the settings and stuff, this will change. So I agree with where you're coming from, is what I'm trying to say, that we need more control. And Apple needs to continue to develop Stage Manager to give users more control. And that's when it's going to become even more powerful. And again, the masses are not going to use it, but more sophisticated iPad users, as the people that might be listening to this podcast that care more about doing more with their device, they're going to want more control, and that's what I think. And if Apple allows that in the upcoming updates to Stage Manager over the next year, then they're going to really have something special here.
Yeah. And again, let me overall say, I like it. I think the dragging from the corner is really cool. I'm typically one that when I do multitasking, I do like to swap between, or I like to copy things from a web page and paste it into, a note, or if I want to copy it and paste it into like a text message, or I'm going to follow Twitter on the side, or have my Spotify app open or something like that. So it is a different way to interact with the iPad. Like many other people have said, you had some good links today that people were saying a lot of the same things, like, Mac Stories and Federico has been talking about this. I hope that it's improved. But anyway, that was sort of a lightning round quickly on managing Stage Manager, which I don't know if I've come down with everything great, but we shall see. So anyway, let's get on to something else that's a little bit more, you have an iPad tip as well, I believe.
Yeah. So my in the know tip is also for the iPad. When you update your iPad to iOS 16.1 and you use the Mail app, which if you're like me is an app that I use extensively, you'll notice that the buttons are in a different position. They're sort of centered on the window on the right. But one of the things that you should notice is that at the very top right, there's a circle with 3 dots in it. And if you tap that, it will give you an option to customize your toolbar. And this is the new feature, which I love. You can move around those icons. If you want to have something on the left or something on the right, you can decide that. You can also add icons up there. And one of the ones that I instantly added was I added a button to mark the message read or unread. Now, I know that keeping an email marked as unread is a helpful way to go back to it, but I also know it's not the right way to. It's not safe. I know. Because you often mark it. We all do it, and you think it's marked, and you unmark it by. So, but I like having a little option right there at the top. I can just tap a button to mark read or mark unread. That's useful. But there's other ones too. Like one of the new features they have is this later feature, and so I just recently added a later button up there. And so let's say I'm looking at an email, and I'm like, okay, I need to deal with this email, but I don't have time to deal with it right now. You can just tap on a later button up there, and then you can say, I want to end the pre-built options are an hour, tonight, tomorrow, and then finally you can set a specific time or date if you want. So I can just very quickly tap on that and say, look, remind me of this tonight. This has nothing to do with me getting work done today. This has to do with my kids' school, but I do want to come back to it. I don't want to forget about it. And then what will happen is that later on tonight, I will get, you know how like reminders will just give you an alert when it's time for something? This works the same way. You will get a little pop-up thing on your iPad. And if you have an Apple Watch, it'll be a pop-up on your Apple Watch and stuff like that. And it will just, have that email. And you're like, oh yeah, I meant to get back to this email, and you can do it. Very useful feature. And it's even more accessible when you put a button up there. So I encourage everybody with an iPad that's updated to iPad OS 16.1 to play around with these features, put some different buttons up there, change the order. Do you want the trash on the left? Do you want the trash on the right? Whatever you want to do. I love this increased customization. And this is one of these little features, Brett, that I'm sure it's been a part of the betas since day one, but it's such a minor feature that I never heard anybody talk about it. But for me, it's like now one of my favorite features, even though it's a tiny little feature. And so this is what I was talking about when we started the show today. It's a tiny little thing added with the iPad OS that I love.
So quickly, I always do the mark unread and mark read. I'm guilty, but I'll tell you the way that I always did it in the past is that I swipe.
Me too.
Yeah, okay, good. So you're there. Now, if I swipe to the right on a message, I also see remind me, which looks like it's the same, later button there. Now, quickly, if I mark something unread on my iPad, it also shows up that same way on my Mac and my iPhone. Does the later reminder do the same thing, Jeff? Will it do that on?
Okay, so later doesn't really change anything about the message, except that if you have a message that you've marked to read as later and you go back to that message, you'll actually see on your iPad, and I guess on your iPhone too, although I haven't noticed it, you'll actually see a little bar at top saying that, you've marked for this message to remind, we're going to remind you of this message at 9:00 tonight or whatever it is.
Right.
It doesn't do anything. I don't know if it does anything on the Mac because I haven't updated my Mac yet to the latest one.
Yeah,
and I also, on my PC, I don't think it would change anything on the PC, on how it looked on my PC, which makes sense. But the whole point is just that it's nice that the email stays in your inbox. It doesn't delete it, it doesn't hide it, doesn't do anything. It's just that you're going to get a reminder associated with that email in the future, and then when you tap on the reminder, it'll bring you right into the email. So that's a nice feature.
That is great, Jeff. Thank you. I knew some of these features were coming, but you're right. On my phone, it now has mail will remind you in an hour, because I say remind me in an hour, and then there's a little edit button so that it brings up a little calendar, so you can say a specific time and a date, or you can just remove it that way. Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant.
By the way, I'll mention, Brett, although it's not my tip of the week, one of the new things that was added in iOS 16, and now we also have on the iPad, is the ability to delay send a message. And it's a nice little feature. I used it just earlier this week because a friend of mine was having their birthday, and before I went to sleep, I'm like, I know that he's an early riser, so I said, send this message at 6 a.m. tomorrow. And so when I was still sleeping, he got the message telling him happy birthday. And I'm like, I certainly did not wake up at 6 a.m. to send that message, but my iPhone did it for me. And thank you, iPhone.
But your friend must think you're that kind to consider it.
Of course. Let's not tell him. Nobody tell him.
Okay. Nobody say anything. Jeff, great stuff. Thanks for talking about everything this week. And we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, Brett. Bye-bye, everybody.